Hello, friends. Kaysha here, and some of you might know me from the Karis Project podcast. So, today I want to share with you a few updates of things that we have going on and how you can be a part of helping us going forward. So, as many of you know, my father, Dale Richardson, is a mechanical engineering technologist with a bachelor's degree in technology, and I worked for the provincial government back home in Saskatchewan, Canada, at a maximum security prison and hospital for the criminally and mentally insane. Now, as many of you know, we were exposing the improper contagion mitigation procedures for the COVID pandemic in early 2020, and likewise, how that relates to human trafficking, treason, and election interference in Canada and the United States. And this is precisely why the Karis Project has filed petitions for redress of grievance in the states of Texas, Colorado, and Michigan, as well as the province of Alberta in Canada. Now, it has recently come to the attention of the Karis Project that there was a mother in Colorado who was punished by the courts for trying to protect her children against a predator for being sexually abused and brutally attacked by the father. She's now going to jail and serving time for trying to protect her children against the evils and the corruption that we have all seen the last few years. Now, this is the same thing that we are seeing with Alberta's Minister of Health, Ariana Lagrange, who would not take the necessary actions to protect children from being sexually abused by convicted pedophiles and continuing to allow them to practice in the province of Alberta. And their licenses are currently being protected by the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons. Absolutely horrendous, if you ask me. The failure of our governments to bring these petitions to the floor have directly affected patriots like Tina Peters in Colorado, who are being politically persecuted with complete impunity, by the way, while convicted pedophiles are being protected. Here at the Karis Project, it is important to us that we the people are able to take our rights back and use our God-given constitutional rights to be able to expose the evil going on in this country and hold politicians accountable. We need especially the strong men to take charge in supporting the Karis Project's action plan financially in doing the work of holding the government accountable to protect our rights. And if you guys know me, you know already that this is my favorite quote, and so I'm going to leave it with you here today, because the most important thing that we need in this country right now is strong men. And I, as a woman, know just as much as anyone else just how valuable and important it is for us to have strong men leading our country to success. And so I'll leave you with this. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their innermost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle is to the pole. And men who will stand for the right, though the heavens may fall. So, my friends, you've heard all that I've had to say today and the importance of the same. As you can see, we have people, strong patriots, and women standing up for what's right and being completely destroyed. Politically, financially, we have good women in this country, good mothers whose children are being completely abused and taken advantage of within the system and even within their homes. And nothing is being done about it. Now is the time to take a stand. The Karis Project has an action plan, and based on all the experience that we've had throughout the years, we have the ability to teach people how to get this done. We need to work together in a time such as this, because our time is limited. Elections are coming up, and something needs to change. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now's the time to take a stand, and that is precisely why I encourage you to stand with the Karis Project for we the people. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Karis Project podcast. And today we have Garland Favorito with VoterGA.org, who has done some work with the election integrity. And of course, my daughter, the host, Kaysha Richardson. So, Garland, I just want to give us a little kind of a little inner overview of kind of what you've been doing over at in Georgia for our viewers?
Well, what we've been doing, Dale, is basically trying to ensure that we have honest elections. You think that would be a really simple thing to do, but it hasn't been. It's been an incredible struggle. It's a journey that has gone on for 20 years, actually, and it has intensified in the last few years leading up to the 2024 election. We've gotten a lot of legislative changes made, some state election board rule changes. We have made a variety of different, done a variety of different things. We've trained a lot of poll workers and watchers, and basically just simply trying to continue the battle to secure our elections, even after this 2024 election. There's still much more work to do, still a lot of cheating going on, and we aim to try to put an end to it so we can have honest elections for the future of our generations and those to come.
All right, just kind of you touched on something here, and you said that the election fraud has been going on for 20 years. How did this start? What was the big kickoff?
Well, it started when America began to move to unverifiable electronic voting equipment. And the first go around of that, bet you remember back in the year 2000 when they had the Gore and Bush race. And in Florida, there were what we call the hanging Chad incident. It was a very close race, and the state of Florida was able to go back and actually hand count the real ballots to ensure the correct candidates won in that race back in 2000. But the voting machine vendors used this as an excuse to bring in this new wave of what I call unverifiable electronic voting equipment. Now, that first new wave back then was a what we call a direct recording electronic machine. And what that system did is that it basically allows you to pick your choices on a touch screen, and then your ballot, poof, went away, and you had no record whatsoever of your vote. There was nothing that you could verify as the voter. There was nothing that the elections officials could audit. There was nothing to recount. It just simply reprinted the previous unverifiable results. And it was no transparency at all because there was no ballot. So we have moved away a little bit from that. That system, which started first statewide implementation of that system, was here in Georgia in 2002. I had tried to stop that at that time, claiming that it was unconstitutional since it could not be verified, results could not be verified or audited, and they were also aware that it couldn't be recounted. 17 years later, in 2019, the United States District Court agreed with what I said 17 years earlier in 2002, and they banned that system for future use. So the Secretary of State then went out and bought a new system, and unfortunately, that system accumulates votes that are in a quick response code, a QR code, that the voters cannot verify. So it is, in its own way, equally as unverifiable as the original system that it was intended to replace. So the bottom line is Georgia has spent a lot of money in fancy technology that really cannot, they have so many security risks with these systems that they really have no business being used in Georgia or anywhere else. So we've been trying to work as hard as we could to expose these flaws, try to get new systems and a new way of voting that we can all trust.
So you're telling me that they're having the ballots on a QR code instead of
Yeah, that's right, Dale. So in Georgia, with the Dominion Democracy Suite 5.5 system, the votes are actually embedded in a QR code on your paper summary, and you can't even begin to verify what was actually accumulated for your votes. And it's not just the Dominion Democracy Suite 5.5, the other leading most popular voting system in terms of installations, certainly not popular with the voters, but that also, the SNS Express vote is also constructed in a similar manner with votes that are accumulated out of QR codes that the voters have no way of verifying, even with a QR code reader.
I'm just thinking about this because I'm a mechanical engineering technologist, right? And I got a background in this, and we have to look at control systems. This is, you would never implement something like this that you couldn't verify, because if something went wrong, how do you correct it? And it's impossible to correct something that you can't verify. So if I don't have, it's like, if you don't have like any part of that control system functioning properly, well, like, how do you gauge your set point if it's a moving target? You can't.
That's right. And the argument there is that, well, you can go back and audit and read the ballots and the text that's on the ballots and determine the winners. But that is only done maybe once every 2 years for a single race. So how do we know that all the other races that the system is actually producing the correct results? And we don't. It's exactly as you said.
You would think that even if you used voting machine, that you would have to have human verification. Like there's just like, if you wanted to have it to rapidly count, I can understand that, but you would still have to go back and have the humans verify it, right, to demonstrate what was being done. Because if anything, they should have been able to finish faster, because I grew up watching elections. I never watched elections take weeks. They're still counting in some places. How is that even possible? You bought all of this expensive machinery, got rid of the paper ballots, which were night, and now you can't count votes in a single night with machines?
Yeah, it's a great question. Maricopa County is probably one of the most notorious for taking weeks to count their election results for reasons that we are still unexplained. So that is a significant issue. And of course, Maricopa is not the only county. They're probably just the worst one. But there's no reason, even those who hand count the ballots can do that in one evening. So there really is no reason for Maricopa, for example, to take weeks to count their ballots when they're using electronic voting equipment. Just makes no sense.
So I just, I'm sitting down here and thinking to myself, why are people doing this? Like, I mean, this is, and how is this even legal? Like, I mean, how is the government getting away with this? Because this is like violating election laws. Like, there's no security to your election. There's no way to determine whether or not something was done correctly. So how can they actually sit down and say, well, we're having fair elections, when nobody can tell?
Well, they keep claiming they're having fair elections, but they can't prove it because, as you said, no one can really verify what the results are. So there just is it's not happening. So it's a real serious problem. There are not enough mechanisms in place to ensure the elections are secure, and that's in almost every state. Georgia, we've made a lot of improvements here, but we still have a ways to go, and the other states are equally as bad, if not worse.
So what improvements have they made, and what do they still need to do in Georgia? Like, I mean, just
Yeah, well, Georgia has made, we've made a lot of legislative improvements. For example, the ballots are now printed on security grade paper with visible watermarks to prevent it from being copied, for and duplicated nefariously. That was a good improvement. We banned outdoor drop boxes where all the those counterfeit ballots came in 2020 at the middle of the night. We have also banned private money. No more Zuckerbucks trying to influence the elections and buying. They're basically buying off really all the states. They've spent $400 million to basically influence the outcome of the 2020 election. So that's been banned. There's been quite a few other improvements in Georgia, not necessarily in other states though. They all the votes have to be tabulated by 8 o'clock on election night if they were received. All the ballots received prior to election day. So that cuts down on these vote swips, vote switches 3 days later, where they're still counting ballots and suddenly the election results change. Those are some of the improvements that Georgia has made. Unfortunately, not a lot of the other states have not made that many improvements, and there's still a lot of risk in our systems for the years to come.
Yeah, like you mentioned some things there about Georgia about the the drop boxes, which they we saw this like go nuts through COVID, right? And that was the justification for putting all of that stuff in. And Trump talked about this that COVID was used to take him out, and he's absolutely correct because I mean, even how they rolled out the pandemic response, the CDC, which is in Georgia, I mean, they were put out guidelines for the engineering controls that they didn't mitigate disease, they in fact spread them. And that's a no no, especially when you realize that the coronavirus that got released came from the Winnipeg Biolab and it went over to Wuhan. And the Nipah virus that went in there in 2018 that was handed over to them was in what they released. And then they used that to just start changing stuff. There's, this is insane. And then they started to put in these drop boxes. Like, you create an effective method for spreading a biological weapon, you're done dead in the water with treason. Then you start making the changes with the drop boxes, that is also treason. And then all the other changes, it's all a part of it. And so when I sit down and I look at what's going on in Georgia and seeing how this is all, playing out with the election fraud, I'm like, there's a lot of players with a lot of vested interest for things not to go the right way because they did a lot of wrong to get people into places where they shouldn't be. And I think that there needs to be a strong push by the people because if you can't verify your election, you don't have a vote. You don't, right? Like, because who won the election? Somebody just said because I said so, and that's exactly what we're getting. Because if you can't verify, you got nothing.
Well, exactly. And if they're declaring the winners, but nobody knows if they're right. The elections are secretly counted by electronic machines. And winners are announced, and the public has no way to prove whether or not the announcement was actually correct. There's just simply no way to prove that the voting systems are giving the correct results.
And this isn't surprising because Dominion comes from Canada, and I mean like we had more missing ballots when Trudeau got elected than there was the margin of victory, right? And all of these things, and Dominion is used across the country, right? So and then you're having all these problems there. So I'm like, it doesn't surprise me. And then somebody showed me that they were citing the voting election fraud, election laws in Canada rather than what they have locally in the States. They're coming printed off for people to certify this. And I'm like, how is this happening?
I couldn't believe that either. We just found that out not too long ago, a week or two ago, that the tabulator tapes actually refer to Canadian election law and not the state of Georgia, any law there. It's really strange. But that's actually a fact. That's exactly what is happening right now in Georgia with the tabulator tapes.
I don't even know how this is legal. I don't even. I, don't- when I saw that, I was like, I mean, you might as well, vote on monopoly money for crying out loud. Like it's not worth the paper that it's written on. I understand that it's got to, you know, a corporation has to operate within the laws of its jurisdiction, but it also has to make sure that it operates in the laws of the jurisdiction where it's putting something in, right? Like, so if you're making something for Georgia, then it's out of Georgia, but then Dominion has a subsidiary in Colorado. So why is the American corporation going ahead and citing Canadian laws? It should be according to the state of Colorado to make sure they're not breaking laws there. And then when you're writing and swearing it in, it should be according to the laws in your state. That's the way it should be.
Yeah, and we haven't gotten an explanation as to why that is those Canadian references to Canadian law are on the American tabulator tapes. That's an interesting point, but we do not have an answer for that yet. I
Yeah,
can't wait to hear.
I want to hear that answer too, because I I can't think of any rational answer to do that. There's no reason.
Well, when you come to electronic voting, there's no rational answer for a lot of things, and that's just one of them.
Yeah, I can see that. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you're kind of doing there with the voter voterga.org? What is it that you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So Voter GA it stands for Voters Organized for Trusted Election Results in Georgia. And it was founded back in 2006. And it was founded really for the express purpose of trying to remove the old voting system from the state of Georgia on the grounds that it was illegal. It violated equal protection and due process constitutional rights, as well as many Georgia state laws. We ended up losing that case in the Georgia Supreme Court, but the U.S. District Court upheld our arguments 17 years later in a different case called Curling v. Ravensburger, and we were able to basically get that system out of here. But we ended up with one, as I mentioned earlier, that's really just about as bad as that one. So even though we were successful in court, we haven't really solved the problem yet. So that's kind of the background on how our organization got started. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, been operating for over 17 years, and just to try to have honest elections. So my wife and I work full time at this. We don't take a salary, and we're just relying upon, donations from patriots that keep us going and keep us fighting. We have a lot of legal cases filed in Georgia to remove, well as we have a lot of problems with our voter registration system that the Secretary of State outsourced to a cloud, which what we believe is illegal. They don't have any authorization to do that under Georgia law. So those are some of the cases that we are fighting. There's quite a few others. We've worked really hard to make the ballots public record here through legislation, and there's legislation, litigation, training. Those are some of all the things that we do, just simply striving for honest elections.
So,
Go ahead,
uh,
Keisha.
just wondering, what, since this has been going on for so long, and like there's so many different avenues we've discussed here that cause the actual voter fraud, but now that Trump has gotten to office, what do you think the solution is going to be to actually correct, all the different failures that they've put into the voting system, because I mean, you've got the Dominion voting machines, you've got their failure to count correctly. You can't even verify. You said there's the QR code bit. So like, what can, and then also the cloud, that's crazy. And they are also using Canadian laws. So like all these things, what do you think is going to be the solution in kind of like rectifying all of these failures? And like, is that a possibility now that Trump is the president elect? We don't know if he'll be in office yet. They're still trying, but we'll see, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, so that's what we hope we'll have a chance. I'm sure once the president is inaugurated, I know he's going to want to try to get to the bottom of what happened in 2020. And then, at least I believe he will. And there's a couple of things there, Kaysha. So there's, the two big components of a voting system. One is the counting, and the other is the voter registration system. So, in regards to the counting, what we really need to do is we need to have hand-marked paper ballots and publicly recorded hand counts of the votes at the precincts, and that would restore people's trust in the voting system itself. So we don't need all this fancy $100 million electronic stuff to do that. That's one area. The other issue is that ballots are being stuffed into the system or injected for ineligible registrations. So in other words, we found that we have these fake registrations that are on the file, and then ballots are mysteriously cast for these fake registrations. So, and this is happening in quite a few states, not just Georgia. So we have to basically clean up the voter rolls and get all those invalid registrations off of the voter rolls. And that's a project that a lot of the citizens have undertaken, and they have challenged these bad registrations, but the counties still have a tendency to leave them on the system, even though they're not valid. So those are the two major thrusts, and we have to really be successful in both of those two things to a large degree in order to secure the next elections that are coming up in the next couple of years.
All right. Just we're going to take a break here, and then we're going to come back, and I've got a question for you about the cleaning up of the voter rolls.
Donald J. Trump is officially the next president of the United States of America. While millions of people are rejoicing in victory, thousands of others are still concerned about their savings. The unfortunate truth is we still have over $35 trillion in debt, plus wars are still raging around the globe. So what can you do to protect your savings? Many Americans are already taking action by reaching out to the top-rated precious metal company, Goldco. Right now, Goldco is offering you a free gold and silver kit to show you how precious metals like gold and silver could help you diversify your savings before it's too late. Visit MikeLikesGold.com or call 855-441-GOLD to get your free gold and silver kit today. Plus, you can receive up to a 10% instant match on bonus silver for qualified accounts. Visit MikeLikesGold.com or call 855-441-GOLD.
All right. So, with the voter rolls, what is the best way to start cleaning them up? Because I've seen some chatter on X about the voter rolls in Georgia recently, and so what would you say would be the best way to deal with that?
Well, what's happening here in Georgia, Dale, is that a lot of the citizens are taking it upon themselves to analyze the voter roll data and then identify the registrations that no longer are valid. And they could not be valid because whoever they once represented has moved out of state. They may have passed on, or they may have there's a variety of things that make them incorrect. So one of the tools that they've been using here is Eagle AI, which is a really good tool that goes out and looks at data and in different states, and it brings that information back in and highlights different registrations where that appear to be no longer valid because the individual had moved out of state or passed away or a variety of other reasons. So those are, I think the thing to do is that they can make those challenges themselves, the citizens, but we have to enforce the counties and make sure that they actually, when they're presented with corroborating evidence that the registration is invalid, they have to take those off, and we need to make it a crime if they don't, and penalize them financially for failing to remove the invalid registrations. If we do that, then the counties will clean up their rolls quickly. Because they don't want to be penalized. So that's one thing we can do in our next upcoming legislation session. There's other things that we can do as well. We need to have a list of ineligible or eligible registrations before the election and a list of voters who voted after. So those are some things we can do to clean up the rolls and then make sure that they're used properly during an election.
So you're saying right now they don't have any penalties for the people that don't clean up the roll? So
That's right. That's right. They're not. There's no incentive or threat for them to make sure their rolls are cleaned up.
this again, like, I don't understand how this got this way without people preparatorily wanting to do this, because like common sense, like, I mean, you can't tell me that every person that worked in government over all of these years was completely stupid. That is absurd. So you're going to tell me something as critical as voting, because voting is important. This is written, like, the right to your constitutional republic is written into your founding documents. So you would think that protecting this so that the people have their will done would be safeguarded. It's not rocket science. This is common sense. It's like a bank protecting their money, right? You're not going to just let the money go down in a little red wagon and have a 5-year-old pulling it down the street. Somebody says, I'll give you the chocolate bar for the wagon. Just they take it, right? Like, this is essentially what people are doing. So you would think that they would have stronger protections, and it just makes me think that there are people that were criminals that wanted this to happen, because it didn't happen overnight. Like you said, this thing was going on for 20 years. And
Yeah, and sometimes they out, there's nefarious actors within the organizations, within the Secretary of State's office, or maybe elections officials in different counties, or sometimes they outsource it, the processing of this to third parties, and then those are also nefarious, and they may have interests that are not in the consistent with the will of the voters. So that's some of the ways in which has gotten completely out of control.
I would
Yeah, that's crazy.
go ahead, Keisha.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's crazy to me because how can the people who are doing this election interference and fraud not have consequences for their actions, but then the people who try to petition their redress of grievance, like the J6 people, are being persecuted and lawfully imprisoned without trial for years and sitting in isolation and solitary? How can these people have no consequence? Then it makes full sense. Everything we've been seeing the last couple of years, these people are just going around committing treasonous acts due to policies that they've put in place and just getting away with it. How does that make sense? This is like the worst possible thing that you can actually do: treason. Election
Yeah,
interference is treason.
well, yeah, it is, Keisha. Thanks for saying that. It's something that we don't say often enough. But it really is treasonous. And unfortunately, they're allowed to get away with it. And a lot of times, and where this is where it gets really ugly, is a lot of times it's the court system that will not hold them accountable. I'll give you an example. Back in 2020, we found that there were counterfeit ballots in the hand count of the audit of the presidential race. Now, we knew these ballots were counterfeit because they were mail-in ballots and they were not folded from being mailed, and they were not written with a writing instrument like a pen or a pencil. They were written with or marked with what appears to be toner copy. And then they were not on the correct paper stock that a ballot's supposed to be on. And they were marked exactly the same way down ballot for dozens of races in a row. So these are obvious counterfeit ballots. We filed a lawsuit for an equal protection due process lawsuit. We said, we want to see the ballots. Show us the ballots. We don't think that they were legitimate. We had 6 sworn affidavits, 4 of them from senior poll managers in Fulton County, saying that they handled these counterfeit ballots in the hand count audit. So we go to court, and the Fulton County hires criminal defense attorneys to prevent us from looking at the ballots. And then after about 10 months, the judge finally decides that, we don't have standing. You don't have standing to look at this. Well, we hadn't changed any of the plaintiffs. It was the same plaintiffs we had 10 months ago. And suddenly he makes this decision. We knew that it was a corrupt decision, so we appealed it. We appealed it to the Court of Appeals. They actually upheld it. Finally, we got to the Georgia Supreme Court, and they agreed with us and overturned the lower court decisions. So we won the case in the Georgia Supreme Court, but when the case moved back down to the superior courts, they again shuffled some things going on, and we still, after 4 years, we have not seen the ballots for the 2020 election yet.
I just got an idea as you're talking here, because where you're looking at, since the Dominion came from Canada, and they were then now citing the election laws in Canada and Dominion in Canada, the parent corporation, and the Canadian government are responsible for this, because this is common knowledge. You should not, if you're exporting something to another country, you can't cite your laws to verify this. This is something where I would go in and go after them and say, listen, what are you doing here? Because you're bringing defective machinery and machinery that's not up to standard for us, and you're doing this deliberately, right? Because the last time I checked, Georgia is not a part of Canada, so why are you doing this? And I would go to their home jurisdiction and go after them there and make a stink about it, because if they do something shady, then people are going to be like, why are you doing that? Because they do this to Canadians, but if they do it to someone from outside the jurisdiction, they're saying you're interfering with us. What are they going to say? Get lost, and we're going to treat you like a Canadian? It's really a little bit different, but it's something to explore.
Well, right. That's a whole nother subject, is the machinery. So, and in the case of Dominion, and the same is true really for ES&S for the most part, but Dominion uses Dell servers, the chips are made in China. Dominion is a Canadian-based company. The programmers for the Dominion system work in Serbia. So why would an American elections want to have foreign programmers and foreign chips and foreign components in their system when those chips can easily be manufactured with malware? The foreigners can also introduce malware. Why would we want any of this in a domestic American election? We wouldn't. It's crazy stuff, but the elections officials have they've purchased this stuff in spite of the fact that it makes no sense whatsoever. and they are complicit as well as the vendors themselves.
Well, and especially seeing that in Canada, there's public knowledge that the CCP has bought and paid for elected officials that are sitting in the liberal government, like Trudeau's cronies. And it's just like, so this is no secret that Canada is like controlled by Beijing. And then they're allowing these types of things to continue, and this is not what you want. Like you can't sit down and say that you're, I mean, it's pretty much turned on hostile to Canadians and hostile to Americans. Why would you want that? Governments run away.
And you wouldn't. That's the bottom line. Any more up there than you would down here. You just wouldn't.
I don't understand how this, like, I mean, I see it, but it doesn't make any sense, because this is where, when the judges, and like it seems like we're watching 1920s West Side Chicago on a massive scale, where you have Al Capone. He's bought off judges. He's got people that will get things. 'Cause I don't think every judge is corrupt. That's nonsense. But there's enough corruption that they can get certain things in front of certain people, where people are not getting the desired result. And you're seeing this happening over and over, because you're watching the judges. Some of these judges, you're like, what? Like, are you reading English, or are you reading something else? Because everybody else is like, I don't see this. So how did you come to that conclusion? And the only thing you can sit down and say is that they're bought and paid for. Like, there's no other reasonable reason for people to consistently make these, no matter what state you're in, no matter where you are, you're consistently seeing these wrong decisions being made. And this is where you got to go to the elected officials, because the courts aren't functioning properly. There's too much corruption in there to allow people to get a fair process. Some slip through, but not enough.
And, yeah, right, Dale. And after a given point in time, you realize that this is not an accident. As you said, this is just people who have been bought off. And it's really a sad situation. And when you consider, as you said, how massive that problem is, it's going to take a long time to clean this up. Fortunately, let's hope we got 4 years, these next 4 years, that we can really make some tremendous strides in cleaning this up. But it's an ugly situation, and quite frankly, many Americans have been asleep at the wheel for decades and have allowed this to happen.
You are correct on that. Asleep at the wheel is the right term to say, because, I mean, people are still sleepwalking now, and it's like the evidence is in front of your face. It's happening everywhere. It's not going to go away. You can't comply your way out of tyranny, because this is what it is. If they're taking away your freedom, that's a tyrant. And I would like personally to see people start tracing the money coming to all of these people. Because I was looking in one of my cases, a federal judge that was dealing with this, and this guy made some very wrong decisions. And this was around the time they were holding me in Colorado and doing a lot of wrong things when I was filing there. And then they went after Tina Peters, because the evidence that I brought would have shut that down and a lot of other things. But this guy then ended up getting, like, he got in problems because he was taking money from other places. And this was on the news. I wonder how many judges are getting money from improper places and all of these other people, because this has got to stop. Those purse strings need to be cut.
And it's hard to track that money down. You know, there needs to be more transparency around how these judges are getting the money, and to continue making these decisions that they're making, which are just, we've gotten just bizarre decisions that no one in their right mind would believe are correct. And that's continuing to happen. So how do we stop that? It's going to be difficult. I think we can do it, but it's really going to be very difficult.
Yes, and I agree. I think this is where we get more people participating, right? And this is one of the things that we did with the petitions because we've got a lot of the election fraud stuff in there because it was tied to COVID. It allowed the election fraud to happen on an unprecedented scale. Like it was there before, but it got thrown in your face. 2020, everybody was like, what? And then now, after they opened the door for taking weeks to count, you're seeing this happen regularly, and this needs to be shut down. People need to go in and go to their state government and say, listen, the judiciary, there's too much corruption, right? For every one case that gets through, how many cases get shut down? This is not the way that things are going to get fixed, and put a pressure on the guys that are elected and give them the Trudeau treatment so that people can go and voice their opinion and make it very difficult for them to make the wrong choice. And the pressure will stop when you start making the right choices as your job is supposed to do, right? It's really it.
Absolutely. Just hope that we can get to that point where the officials are beginning to make right decisions instead of wrong decisions. It's going to take a complete overhaul of this whole election system here in America.
I agree. And I see from my experience of what I've seen, the elected officials are actually the weakest link in the chain because judges, they're there for life, right? Like the federal judges and so forth. And then, I mean, the state judges, there's too much corruption, like you say, you can't track where this money's going. So that you replace that judge, but then they'll just put another dirty judge in there, like how Soros is funding DAs and all these things. So
Right.
you got to go for the elected officials because they're the ones you get the most access to, and really put the squeeze on them, and the people got to pressure them and work with the guys that are already there that want to do what's right and support them so that we can get the changes done because like Trump can't do this by himself, right? People's got to back him up, right?
Yeah. And he's going to need a lot of people in a lot of different places, to pull this off. So I'm hoping and praying that he is up for the task. And I think he is.
Well, I think so. I think that at this point in time, like, and people are like, well, Trump this and that. I'm like, listen, it's not about one person. No person's perfect, but it's about the changing of the guard. If you had left Harris and the Democratic Party in to go in and do this, it was it would have went sideways very fast. Now, some of the picks that people are saying they don't agree with, but I'm like, okay, well then let them know, right? This is what you're there for your government. If your government doesn't do something that you like, then you tell them, because if you think that there's a better person, by all
Yeah.
means say something. If you don't, how is he going to know? Because I'm sure the bad people around him, of course there are, because the corruption runs in both parties. So if they're one party's getting outed, what are they going to do? They're going to start running to the other side to try to, accomplish whatever they're doing. They're criminals. It's like the guy driving down the street in a high speed chase. Do you think he's going to give up? No, he knows just laying a spike belt down the road, but he's going to go until the spike belt catches him, the car shatters, and he's lying on the grass if he's not dead, and the police collect him and cuff him, right?
Yes.
That's
Let's hope we can get to fix this before we get to that point.
well, yes,
Of
because
elections.
we don't want to do that. We don't want people to get injured. But before we wrap up here, I just want people to know, where can they come in and help you? Like, what can they do? What can people do in your area?
Thank you, Dale. So we are here in VoterGA.org. We have a wealth of information up on our website. We have got legal documents and studies and various events and press conferences we've had. That's all up there for viewing. We show you where the fraud was in Georgia in 2020, as well as nationally. We have a lot of information up there about other states, and we are basically continuing this fight. As I mentioned before, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and we have been doing this for 17 years. So we rely mostly on donations from patriots around the country that watch, your show, like Frank's speech and other folks, and that's what keeps us going. We, since we don't take salaries, we use almost all that money just for legal defense funds. Or actually, it's more of a legal offense fund. We are constantly filing lawsuits and trying to improve the legislation and things to continue to secure the elections. So we are volunteers, so the money goes for a really, really good cause at almost 100%.
All right, that's good, and I'm go and support him and the work he's doing, because I mean every state we have to work locally, like, and then let the guys that are working on the national level work nationally, and then that's how it gets done, because the people are the most important part of the equation, and you have to start making your communities more secure and everything else like that. So go out and support them in every way you can, and I know that there's links on the social media on their page so that you can follow them and all that sort of stuff. Get out, get involved, and so forth. And before we go, I'll close with a prayer before I give my daughter her final thoughts on the issues. All right. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. Lord, we thank you for the hope that you have given us. And Lord, we thank you for the work that Garland and his people are doing. And help them that they would continue to move forward, and give them the support that they need to help the people, that they would get their freedoms, and help the men to stand with the women, and help them to rebuild their churches, their families, their communities, and their nation, that we'd have some peace and prosperity until we see you coming in the clouds. This is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Dad, for the prayer as always. And thank you, Sir Garland, for joining us today. I hope that everybody really takes into consideration all the information you shared, because our elections need to be safe and secure. They need to be verifiable. And we need to be able to know where all of these things are coming from. We shouldn't be having, voter machines from other countries with the rules from other countries, and all these different QR codes and all this nonsense, all these fake ballots going in. Like, we need to have a safe and secure election. We need to work with people to get that done. Trump is in office, so we have an opportunity now more than ever, I think, to correct a lot of these issues. But that doesn't mean that the work is done. We still have loads of work to do yet, which means we have to stand together and unite our forces, legal, lawfully, ethically, and morally, as Ivan Raiklin would say, to make sure that we secure these things going forward. Because if not, then the cycle will continue, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And it's time we grab this opportunity by the horns and make it a completely different result. So thank you again, Garland. I hope all of you guys go and check out the work that they're doing and support the same. We'll catch you guys in the next one. And to my dearest Karis, until we meet again, my friend, and we will. Ciao.